about 4 years ago. He did, and you said a few things, a lot of promises made and promises kept. You said you're going to get your father elected, you're going to advocate for the American worker, the American family. Thank you for doing all of that. Oh my gosh, it's the privilege of a lifetime. So this is a country we all love so much, and I think anyone would do the same thing for the opportunity. So I feel very blessed, and it's been an amazing 4 years, a truly remarkable 4 years. And I think if any of us in this room have anything to do with it, we would love to see it. Absolutely. 4 years. We're all here working, right? Well, I'm going to start by asking you just a few questions, and then I have some questions from our wonderful audience members that, given these difficult circumstances, I'm going to read. But when I read your question, could you please raise your hand so we know who it came from? Thank you. So just to get started, the Trump administration has confronted COVID-19 head-on. Can you tell us what the White House and administration has done to save American lives?
Well, obviously, this pandemic is unprecedented. Over 100 years, and it has been enormously devastating on the nation and the world. And the president has responded rapidly and addressed the severity of the crisis. I was with him in the Oval Office when he closed down travel first to China and then to Europe. And these are not easy decisions. He took the strongest, most inclusive economy in the history of this country, record low unemployment against every metric imaginable, and he shut it down. He did so to save American lives. He didn't waver. He didn't do it with a quartering heart. He knew how serious it was, but he also knew how incredibly important it was to prepare the country for what was coming, and he did that. So immediately began the production of ventilators. And ventilators are not, I was just yesterday in Detroit with Mary Barra of General Motors, and she was talking about her engineers going through the process of ventilator production. Just yesterday, she delivered the last of her 30,000 ventilator shipment. And she was describing how technically challenging these ventilators are to build. So it's not like one of these things you can develop in rapid speed, but by mobilizing the great American private sector. And she was sharing with me a great story about how the most complex part of a ventilator looks almost exactly like a transistor. So they were able to cut a lot of time off of the production because of that. Now, we tried to build it ourselves, and we never would have found those synergies. The same with the N95 mask. The element of it that was so in demand and was backlogged was very similar to the seat of a certain type of car. So they went to that supplier who started making the N95 mask, and will still do it as a result going forward. But there were so many things that had to be done, from taking decisive action to prevent more of the virus from coming into our country, to working with the governors of each of the states to assess what they had in terms of their needs. Everyone wanted everything, of course, but it had to be rationed and was done so effectively. I think we all feel very fortunate that there wasn't an American who needed a ventilator that went without one, despite projections. He developed the most robust testing system in the world, and the numbers are just off the charts in terms of how much we've tested our population relative to any other country in the world, with India being a distant number 2. And thank God our mortality rate is very low, amongst the lowest, if not the lowest in the world. So it's a very challenging time to, leveraging all of government. He really he did a phenomenal job, and it's still going. The relief package was so important for just the PPP alone, the Paycheck Protection Act. 50 million Americans kept their job because of it, that were employed by businesses that were able to maintain the employment and keep the payroll because of the rapidness of delivering those loans. Here in Pennsylvania, $20 billion went to small business owners, the average loan size being a little over $100,000 in PPP. And it's not really a loan, it's a grant, because as long as you spend it on payroll and overhead, it's forgiven. So if you don't, well, that's a different story, but it's forgivable loan. So the fact that all of that was accomplished so quickly in the SBA put out more loans in 13 days than in 13 years prior. So that's speed, and that's the type of efficiency that's not typical, to say the least, in government. So the response was robust, but it's ongoing until this virus is vanquished. And we return, I don't want to use the word normal because I think we'll be better as a country because of the challenges we faced, whether it's a countrywide commitment to what the president's been advocating for so long on bringing back critical trade and manufacturing here to this country. And just another data point, under the past administration in Pennsylvania alone, over 50,000 manufacturing jobs were lost. This administration, from inception, more than 16,000 remain. So the catch up plus 16. So we're very proud of that track record, and it's going to be accelerated coming out of this pandemic.
That's so important. We briefly touched on the economy. The president has built an incredible economy while in office. One of the strongest in American history and strongest in the world. How did President Trump create this unprecedented growth in revenue?
I think first and foremost by championing the American worker and American innovators. He was unapologetic about believing in American exceptionalism and that we have the greatest country in the world. And he's incredibly proud of the American worker, and he thinks that they've been robbed of many opportunities that would have otherwise benefited them. So first and foremost, America needed that champion. And I can't tell you how important that is because in all these foreign travels, he's at the table fighting for our workers. And it's not, America first is not America alone. It really isn't. But his job is to represent America, American interests, and he has been doing that very forcefully. So that's first and foremost, being just a cheerleader for this country on the world stage and against the special interests here at home. Secondly, tax cuts, enormously important. We have to compete against local companies, and they're going to go where it makes sense for them to locate based on taxes. And the same is true of individuals; they will relocate. So the world has changed in that regard, and we needed to fall in line with where the rest of the world was. And because of historic tax cuts that hadn't occurred in over 30 years, he enabled American businesses to be competitive, and that benefits everyone. Secondly, and this is not as publicly celebrated, but I would say it's as important as the tax cuts is the deregulatory efforts, because that impacts from everyday citizens just wanting the government to be more effective and efficient in service of them, whether it's going to the DMV, whatever it is, everyone's experienced the bureaucracy and red tape that exists. Oftentimes instituted with good intentions that have been layered and layered and layered to the point where cutting these regulations, a lot of it's eliminating the redundancy. So it's obviously health and safety, all of these things have to be considered, and there is such a thing as good regulation. But when people just pile it on year after year, it really puts a brake on innovation and economic opportunity. And a lot of the people who are most disproportionately impacted are as upward mobility options for the lowest wage earners. So we saw this, and we've been, a lot of the challenges around licensure are happening at the state and local level. So we've been working really closely with the governors to say, there doesn't need to be a license to be a dog owner. Allow people to make that extra income. You shouldn't need to have X hundred of hours to braid hair. It's not right and it's not fair, but it's become this reliable fee stream for state and local officials. And that's got to stop because it really is impeding mobility and upward. Just by way of example, mobility in America has decreased by 50% since 1980. And a lot of it is these regulations. You can't afford the licensure, so you don't move. because it doesn't cross over state lines. So there's a lot we can do on this front. But to answer your question, I think energy independence, renegotiated trade deals, NAFTA, and now USMCA. NAFTA was terrible for Pennsylvania. USMCA is just taking off now. It's going to be phenomenal. So the renegotiated trade deals, tax cuts, deregulation, and a leader who wakes up every morning wanting to go to the mat fighting for American workers. And when he does sleep, goes to bed with the same group. And you know, it seems to me,
approach to running the country.
100%. But it requires a lot of courage. You don't give yourself things that seem common sense. People come out of the woodworks and they tell you all the reason. Bureaucracies are fascinating because trying to do anything is like turning a tanker. And it's not so nimble. It's not like a speedboat. And so just being able to sort of seize that and be able to make these movements and the special interests, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, the number just in terms of the executive order to cut drug pricing by potentially upwards of 50%. The number of people who shock on both sides of the aisle, every head of every pharmaceutical company, the people that come out of the woodworks to try and tell you why you shouldn't do something, you start to understand why a politician with less courage backs down. And quickly.
Well, you use the analogy of a tanker. I believe that President Trump,
he's a tanker.
Yes, he's a tanker in the best possible way. He has turned the tanker of Washington, D.C. Upside down for the best possible reason in the best possible way. And that's really Trumpism.
Yeah.
He's a breath of fresh air in a broken system.
I always say that Washington, D.C. hasn't changed Donald Trump. Donald Trump has changed Washington.
These changes truly benefited the American people?
Well, I think when you look, and obviously we're in this, this unprecedented time, but if you look at what happened in the first 3 years of this administration, we went from the lowest, slowest growth coming out of a recession in the history of the economy to the changes we made on tax cuts and deregulation, all the other things I've talked about, it going like this. So if you look at new business formation, Pennsylvania is setting records in terms of the businesses that were open. If you look at the opportunities that were created for the lowest end of the economic spectrum, it was so exciting because for the first time in a generation, you had the fastest wage growth going to the bottom of income earners. You had one of the statistics I personally am so inspired by is this is opportunity. Unemployment was so low that in 2019, of all the new jobs created, 72% of them went to people outside the labor force. People not even on unemployment, people that hadn't even been looking, but came back into the labor market because wages were up and there was demand, and because employers were stepping up and heeding the president's call to invest in their workforce and their skills and their capabilities. So employers were getting creative and saying and giving chances and opportunities to people that otherwise would have overlooked. And that was lifting everyone. So that is what we're going to get back to and then some.
And you're speaking about the workforce. I sat here with you just a few years ago and we talked a lot about paid family leave. As a mother's wife, I know you realize that that's tremendously important. Where do you see the next steps in that process?
I think, like with everything else, the virus has underscored the need for smart, family-friendly policies. The reality is, in the vast majority of all homes, all parents work in this country. So we needed to change laws and to be more inclusive of the realities of the modern family and the modern workplace. But the debates didn't run stale, right? So there was one side advocating something, not building coalitions, not getting traction. The president's done more to advance paid family leave in a way that's consistent with conservative ideas and values than anyone's done in numerous things by creating a national paid leave tax credit. In his first year in office, first ever, by being the first president of either party to put it in every budget that's been published since he's been in office. By securing paid leave for the federal workforce. As the country's largest employer, we have to be leading by example for encouraging businesses to do the same and take care of our own workforce. So there have been so many family-friendly policies that have been put in place that are new solutions. The first ever bipartisan legislative proposal has been put out on paid family leave, but that aren't mandates on small businesses, that enable people to have the flexibility but provide people the coverage to care for their families. So I'm very proud of the work he's done on that front, and during COVID we've seen that as well with the paid leave. And look, every parent knows that the cost of childcare is unaffordable for far too many, and it's just a reality that childcare is an undeniable work-related expense. And so many women are struggling with this right now. Well, even before this happened, this president, our president, in the 3 years prior to COVID, he increased the amount of money that was block granted to governors of each state 2 times for offsetting the cost of childcare, the largest ever expansion in the program, recognizing that people who want to work, we want to encourage the connection and connectivity to the workforce while also celebrating the important life event like having a child.
Other than his family accomplishments, there are so many great things that President Trump has accomplished. What are you most proud of?
Oh, goodness.
It's all ordering.
This is hard. This is hard. He likes to joke that he's kept more promises than he's made. Which I think is true. You take something like criminal justice reform. Well, he never promised to do that. It wasn't something he campaigned on. He did it because it was the right thing to do. So those circumstances make me very proud. When he'll go outside of sort of the typical problem set. It's not like he doesn't have enough to tackle and deliver on. But he fundamentally believes in fighting for people who have been given a raw deal. And he is always seeking opportunities to do that. An issue, 2 issues that we were talking a little bit about family-friendly policies, and I'm really proud of the double child tax credit. Now I see Democrats talk about doubling the child tax credit, yet when I was fighting to have it doubled because the president was insisting on it as part of tax cuts, not a single Democrat voted yes. But we got it doubled, so that the average family, 40 million families in America, got an average of $2,200 back in their pocket in 2022 alone. Recognizing whether you're a stay-at-home parent or a working parent, the best investment we can make is in our kids, and it's incredibly expensive to raise children. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment. I'm very proud of taking bold action and moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which is incredibly important. I think we've seen the ripple effect that's happening. The whole landscape in the Middle East has been changed, right? And we're seeing it every single day. There's a new positive event reconciling and advancing peace in the region. And nobody ever lost money betting against peace in the Middle East, right? Like nobody, everyone, all the naysayers say it can't be done, it can't be done. Well, the president made a peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The first flight ever from Israel to the UAE happened 3 days ago. My husband was on board. And another first was a funeral at Saudi Arabia airspace, which has never happened before. And now the Saudis have opened it up to all travel between Israel and the UAE. Bahrain opened it up to all travel. So it's changing. It's the paradigm is shifting. So I think that's really exciting. And for me as a parent, as an American, I think probably one of the promises I'm most happy that he's honored is his commitment to draw down troops and not engage American men and women in senseless war and wars over causes that
time and time again. Explain to us why this is so important.
Well, it's almost self-explanatory, right? What is more important than investing in the potential of our children? And I think everything starts with education. And we were talking a little bit before. I view childcare as education because it's stimulation, right? It's 0 to 5 are the most important years in terms of explosive brain growth, the neural pathways, everything that's happening. If you underinvest during that period of time, it's so hard to catch up later on. So thinking about the younger children and making sure they're in stimulative, nurturing environments. And then, of course, for older children, every family knows what's right for them. Whether their child has special needs, whether they want to raise their children with certain values as part of a faith-based community, whether it's as simple as a school district that's better based on the individual personality of that child. Every American should be afforded that opportunity. And I think the resistance to it is truthfully, I think it's one of the most unfortunate things happening in this country. So the president has, you talk about sort of special interests punching back, but he has been fighting so hard to give all Americans an equal opportunity to learn, to flourish, and thrive. And that is setting the foundation for a successful next generation. So that will continue. Much great work has already been done on that front, but then it all comes back to the fact that when it comes to something as personalized as education, one size does not fit all. And a family, a parent, and the child themselves, their input is critical and oftentimes too overlooked as part of the process.
I think that's such an important concern for every parent. Thank you for advocating for that as a mother and perspective and understanding concerns very much. Well, now it's your turn. So I'm going to read some of your questions, and please, as indicated, just raise your hand. Normally you would be asking these questions, but we're making the best of these very difficult situations. So this is from Teresa.
It's hard having, I heard it's going to be a small group, it's obviously a social distancing requirement, but I love having the ability to talk in such an intimate setting. So it's great to be here with all of you under these unusual circumstances. So
I see everyone.
I love the room.
There's a lot of time. So Teresa, is Teresa here? There she is over there. So Teresa asked, as one of the most respected women and moms in the world, can you speak about your work accomplishments on sex trafficking and how we as women can help you and the president?
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question. And actually, going back to one of the things I'm most proud of, this is high on my list. People did not realize that this was happening in America to the extent that it was happening in America until this president entered office. Now it has been elevated as part of dialogue, and that's making parents, educators, everyone more vigilant and more proactive in terms of combating it. But sex trafficking, human trafficking in general it's a global problem, but it is also a domestic problem. And that was something that was overlooked. This president has signed 9 pieces of legislation into law, specifically combating human trafficking at home and around the world. There has been a very proactive, very forceful push to once and for all end trafficking in all of its evil forms. And we are committed to doing exactly that, whether it's giving prosecutors more resources, housing grants for survivors being pulled out of these situations. Up to 40% of people being trafficked are being trafficked by somebody in their own home, which is horrendous. And we think about these sheltering-in-place situations, that makes them even more vulnerable. I think for every parent in the room, knowing that many of our children are being educated online, the number of children who are being groomed and exploited and also being pulled in these situations, oftentimes the traffickers find them, these works online. So our kids' internet use is through the roof. So just creating awareness campaigns. We we launched a couple of weeks ago a pledge that we're asking parents to take and children to take. So the children sign a pledge, the parents sign a pledge when they watch these informational videos that were created at the Department of Justice in combination with the NGO community to just create awareness, age-appropriate awareness of the risks that are out there. That online exploitation is up over 100% in the United States because of the amount of time our kids are spending online. So this is a serious challenge, and we are dedicating all the attention and resources possible to really making just a massive impact and hopefully eradicating this as a problem. So thank you for that great question.
Great question, Teresa. Next, we have a question from Val in Wilmot. Val asks, I've been following your women's initiatives. How much of your focus will continue to be on working women in the next 4 years of the Trump presidency?
A lot. That actually is really was a huge catalyst of what motivated me to move to Washington and campaign just to fight for some of these issues where they benefit everyone, they benefit the whole family, but oftentimes women are disproportionately impacted in some of these issues around childcare. That has a disproportionate impact on women, the enormous cost because of single-family homes, because of the increased number of working parents who need to work working women who need to provide for their family. An area that I'm really passionate about is how to engage women in some of the fast-growing sectors where they've historically been underrepresented. And that starts young by exposing our young girls to computer science education, STEM education, because those are the lucrative industries of the future. We want to make sure that the next generation of women are desiring to be mathematicians and engineers and computer scientists so that they share in the same opportunities that our sons have. So I'm passionate about helping all Americans rise, and obviously looking at specific obstacles for specific populations and seeing how we can address that to level the playing field. Thank you.
So someone who did put their name on here also asked a question about STEM education. What's your name? Becky. Okay. So Becky asked, STEM education is no longer the way of the future. It's here.
That's right.
What can we do to ensure that our young women are given opportunities to excel in these subjects?
So one of the things I was really very excited about was the president's interest in the announcement of the State of the Union pushing vocational education so that every high school student in America has access to vocational education. Because you think of STEM, a lot of young people are intimidated away from it. They think they have to be some super genius in computer science, but the number of high demand STEM opportunities that exist in America that don't require a college degree is enormous. And they're great paying jobs. So helping people gain exposure to skills trade opportunity, to opportunities in the STEM space that require credentials, to all the way up to, of course, university type of studies is something that the president and I am really passionate about. One of the first things he did was sign a presidential memorandum instructing the Secretary of the Department of Education, Secretary of the Laws, to prioritize STEM education as part of her portfolio with a particular focus on computer science, which upwards of 60% of all the jobs that exist today in the STEM fields are specific to computer science, and also to prioritize grants that foster inclusion of minorities and women because of the great underrepresentation in this field. So we've been seeing the fruits of that, and we've been seeing the numbers really start to move pretty dramatically as a result of both, I think, private sector awareness and interest in diversifying the workplace, and also our push and our funding efforts to ensure that there's more programming in our rural and our rural communities, suburban communities, and cities across the nation.
I think we have a question from Dr. F. Where's Dr.? Our lovely gracious host. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having us. And here's your question. I wish you could read it, but I shall for you. We're going to do a good job. We see how the president responds on camera to tragedies. Could you give us some insight as to how these things affect him personally?
It depends what the circumstances, but he is motivated by people. For him, politics is about people. And I think so many of these seasoned, hardened politicians, things are statistics. People get reduced to numbers rather than individuals. So one of the stories I told at the convention that I really think about it all the time. When we started the process of renegotiating the job-killing NAFTA to replace it with the USMCA, he would travel across the country. He'd meet with farm workers, he'd meet with farmers. He'd ask them what their concerns were, and those stories is what really drove him. So the number of times I was with him with Ambassador Lighthizer, the chief trade negotiator for the U.S., my husband Jared was very actively involved in the USMCA renegotiation, and we always started and ended every conversation with how the Wisconsin dairy farmers, they met as a pull aside to an unrelated trip, how they would like it. Would they be gaining the access that they wanted and needed to be competitive, the access to the Canadian marketplace? But that's true of everything. And it is the toughest job in the world. It's incredibly inspiring in terms of the opportunity to uplift and help people. But the enormity of the responsibility is very real. And he responds to it with a tremendous heart. This is a job that I'm going to take. The leader in industry, I think it just is a sign of how much he truly cares about it.
Our next question is from Rabbi Spiro. How can we demonstrate to the citizens of America that the president's efficient and can-do spirit is the greatest expression of his love and concern for the American?
Yeah, it's a funny thing that we compare that the can-do spirit is unusual. In the highest office of the land, but you have to have, the energy usually. On any given day, you'll give 3 speeches, a couple of awards, and then have countless hours of policy time, and we take some of the hardest decisions. You have to be high energy. It's basic criteria for the job. And because it's such a hard job, you have to also be deeply passionate and empathetic and motivated and all of these things because this is a tough business. There's a lot of incoming, and then there's the pressures of the office. So I think that type of optimistic mindset, and to your point, use the expression "can-do attitude," but I think that's critical. It's the people who, and not to say optimism grounded in reality, right? But you have to believe, and you have to push your people to deliver. You can't be a constant pessimist. You want to surround yourself with people who will tell you all the issues and make an educated decision. But the few very successful people that I know are pessimists. They always swing for the fences. They dream big and bold, and they tend to rise to the occasion. The higher they set their goals, the higher they end up soaring. And he certainly falls into that category.
That's a great quote from being optimist right there. I'm going to use that one. Well, I have one final question. The name wasn't on here, but it was about momentum for small businesses. Keeping me up. What's your name? Debbie. Okay, thanks, Debbie. So Debbie asks, what is the president's plan going forward to keep the momentum for small businesses returning to strength that we saw pre-COVID?
Well, small business is the backbone of our country, the heart and soul of it is so important to support them in this, always, and protect them, but especially now with these challenges. That's why we're really proud of the speed in which we got the Paycheck Protection Program launched, the scale in which we were able to accomplish in terms of lending in such a short period of time. We are now fighting for Congress to do more, to join forces with us to create an extension on the opportunity for small business owners. In a lot of areas in the country, they can't open. So this flag is no fault of anyone, no fault of these small business owners, and they shouldn't be punished for it. And it's no fault of their workers who aren't allowed to go and unlock the doors of the small businesses and stores. So we're going to continue to fight for well-crafted relief for our small businesses. We'll continue our deregulatory push. Additional tax cuts in the second term is something the president is very motivated to see get done. So he will always be championing small business first and foremost. That was my final question. I think on behalf of the audience, small and great, thank you so much, but no one is allowed to leave. We are all going to stay in our spots. You have to stand up and do a group photo. How does that sound?